You watch someone at work get promoted, and the first thought that hits you is ugly. Not polite ugly. Real ugly. How? How is that person moving up when they ask basic questions in every meeting, miss obvious details, repeat your ideas like they just invented them, and somehow leave every mess with cleaner hands than the people who actually fixed it? And then right behind that thought comes the one you don't say out loud. Maybe being smart is a disadvantage here. That thought doesn't come from arrogance. It usually comes from exhaustion, from the quiet humiliation of watching competence lose to confidence over and over again. From realizing that the workplace you entered with this hopeful, almost innocent belief, work hard, think clearly, do great work, and eventually people will notice, is not the workplace you actually live in. Because a lot of people who feel overlooked at work aren't less capable. They're trapped in a psychological loop that makes capable people easier to use than to promote. And the people they call dumb are often winning for a very uncomfortable reason. They are not playing the same game. That's the part that hurts. Not because the system is completely fake. It's not. Competence matters. Skill matters. Results matter. But once you step inside an organization, especially a messy one, performance is only one layer of reality. Underneath it is another layer: perception, comfort, politics, timing, signal management, emotional ease, and one thing that changes almost everything: how expensive you feel to other people. That's where the psychological breakdown starts. Because highly capable people often assume their job is to reduce problems. But promotion often goes to the person who reduces friction. Those are not the same thing. The best thinker in the room can still lose to the person who makes other people feel clear, safe, and validated. Not because leaders are stupid. Not always. But because human beings do not evaluate value in a neutral way. They evaluate it through emotion, ego, speed, and relief. And relief is powerful. The person who seems decisive gives people relief. The person who sounds certain gives people relief. The person who doesn't complicate things gives people relief. The person who says, "Got it, I'll handle it," with zero visible inner conflict gives people relief. Meanwhile, the more thoughtful employee often brings nuance, caveats, second-order consequences, and uncomfortable truths. Which is useful. Sometimes essential. But in the moment, it feels heavier. It creates cognitive load. It makes people sit with ambiguity. And ambiguity is stressful, especially in environments where everyone is tired, behind, political, or secretly insecure. So the very trait that makes someone sharp can make them feel harder to promote. Not because intelligence is bad. Because intelligence often expresses itself in ways that don't photograph well. Think about the employee who actually knows what can go wrong. They don't say easy. They say, "We can do that, but here are the trade-offs." They don't give a crisp fake answer in 5 seconds. They pause. They qualify. They think. They update. They ask one more question before making a promise. In a healthy system, that looks mature. In a fast, insecure, ego-driven system, it can look uncertain. And once you understand that, a lot of office frustration starts making more sense. The person getting promoted faster is not always the dumbest person. They're often the least internally conflicted person. That distinction matters. A lot of smart employees live in a state of chronic self-correction. They hear themselves as they speak. They anticipate objections before they arrive. They edit mid-sentence. They notice complexity in real time. They compare what they know to what they don't know. They instinctively avoid overstating. They want to be accurate, not merely persuasive. That sounds like a strength, because it is a strength. But socially, in competitive systems, it can register as weakness if it's not paired with visible authority. Meanwhile, someone with a much flatter mental model can move with shocking speed. They don't feel the drag of complexity because they barely perceive it. They don't hesitate because they don't run internal simulations of 5 possible failures. They don't self-edit because they're not deeply aware of how incomplete their understanding is. And here's the brutal part. That confidence is often rewarded before it is tested. By the time reality exposes their limitations, they've already built visibility, relationships, narrative, and title. So when people say, dumb employees get promoted faster, what they're often describing is not low intelligence itself. They're describing the promotion advantage of low self-doubt, low nuance, low inhibition, and high social certainty. It feels like stupidity from the outside because the person's blind spots are obvious to anyone actually doing the work. But inside the system, the signal they emit is powerful. I am easy to read. I am easy to trust. I am easy to place. I don't make leadership feel confused about me. And that last part is bigger than most people realize. A lot of genuinely smart employees are hard to place because they're carrying too much invisible complexity. They're doing 3 jobs. They're fixing issues nobody sees. They're buffering incompetent teammates. They're protecting standards. They're solving technical problems, emotional problems, process problems. Their value is distributed across the system like electricity. Essential, but strangely invisible until it's gone. And invisibility is a trap, because organizations often promote from what they can narrate, not just from what they can benefit from. If your contribution is buried inside maintenance, rescue work, quality control, or silent problem prevention, it can keep the whole machine alive while making your career look flat. The less competent employee, ironically, may be leaving a cleaner promotion trail simply because their work is more theatrical. They present more. They speak sooner. They summarize louder. They attach themselves to outcomes in public. They make sure people remember they were in the room when something moved. The competent employee thinks, the work should speak for itself. The system replies, the work doesn't speak. People do. And now the emotional pattern gets deeper. Because once a smart person notices this, they usually react in one of two ways. Either they become bitter and withdraw, or they try to outperform the unfairness. Both responses often make the problem worse. Withdrawal makes you easier to overlook. Overperforming makes you more useful where you are. This is one of the cruelest loops in modern work. The employee who feels under-recognized often responds by becoming even more indispensable. They stay later, fix more, catch more, own more, rescue more. They think they are building an undeniable case. But what they are often building is dependency without leverage. They become the person no one wants to lose in their current seat. That sounds like job security. It's often career paralysis. Because promotion is not only about proving value. It's about proving replaceability at your current level and legitimacy at the next one. If your whole identity in the organization is the one who quietly saves everything, leadership may genuinely admire you while unconsciously keeping you exactly where you are. You are too valuable to move and not visible enough to force the move. That's not fairness. That's organizational gravity. And the employee who seems less capable, they may not be carrying the machine, but they're carrying a cleaner executive story. They are seen managing, not just doing. They are associated with motion, not just maintenance. They create the impression that they can operate one level up because they already perform the language of that level. That's another uncomfortable truth. Promotions often follow role rehearsal. People don't just reward ability, they reward familiarity. If you already sound like a manager, present like a manager, frame issues like a manager, and make decisions with manager-style confidence, people start emotionally placing you there before the title exists. A highly capable employee can sabotage themselves by sounding forever like the smartest analyst in the room instead of a future leader. Not because they lack leadership ability, because their psychology is still organized around proving competence rather than claiming authority. And that usually comes from somewhere deeper than work. A lot of very competent adults were trained early in life to earn safety through usefulness. Be impressive. Be reliable. Don't be arrogant. Don't take up too much space unless you can justify it. Be right before you speak. Be valuable before you ask. Anticipate needs. Don't create problems. That conditioning creates amazing workers. It does not always create promotable presence. Because promotable presence requires something psychologically difficult, the willingness to be seen before you are fully armored. To speak before the thought is perfect. To claim contribution before everyone applauds. To let your judgment land without wrapping it in 12 disclaimers. To tolerate the risk of being misread as confident. And that risk terrifies people who have built their whole identity around never being careless, never being cringe, never being one of those loud, mediocre people who talk big and know little. So they overcorrect. They become so allergic to appearing foolish that they disappear behind precision. Meanwhile, the person they judge as dumb is not carrying that burden at all. That person may be wrong more often, yes, but they are visible more often too. And in environments where attention is currency, visibility compounds faster than quiet excellence. Now, none of this means you should become fake. It doesn't mean the loudest person is secretly better. It doesn't mean intelligence is useless or that all promotion systems are broken. It means something more subtle. At work, value has to be translated. If it stays trapped inside effort, quality, and private standards, it may never convert into movement. And this is where a lot of smart employees get emotionally stuck, because they moralize the whole thing. They tell themselves, if I have to signal, it's politics. If I have to summarize my own work, it's ego. If I have to build relationships, it's manipulation. If I have to make leadership comfortable, it's selling out. So they refuse translation on principle. Then they watch less principled people rise. And the resentment gets worse, because now it feels like corruption. Sometimes it is corruption, but often it's simpler than that. It's communication. It's packaging. It's emotional ergonomics. It's whether your competence arrives in a form other humans can easily reward. If every interaction with you makes other people feel slightly inadequate, overloaded, corrected, or confused, they may still respect you, but they won't instinctively pull you upward. If every interaction with someone else makes people feel clearer, calmer, and more confident in their own judgment, That person gains momentum, even with less depth. That is not a statement about merit. It's a statement about human bias. And once you see it, the real question changes. It stops being, why are dumb employees getting promoted? And becomes, what signals am I accidentally sending that keep my intelligence from converting into influence? Maybe you're too buried in execution. Maybe your best work is invisible maintenance. Maybe you only speak when you're 95% sure, while someone else speaks at 40% and owns the room. Maybe you present truth in a way that feels heavy instead of actionable. Maybe you correct when you could frame. Maybe you wait to be recognized instead of helping people recognize you. Maybe you confuse humility with self-erasure. And maybe the deepest issue is this. You still believe work is a courtroom where evidence wins. A lot of workplaces are theaters. Not fake theaters. Human theaters. Rooms where people are constantly deciding who feels senior, who feels safe, who feels clear, who feels like relief. If you ignore that layer, you can be brilliant and still end up narrating your own stagnation. The good news is that once you understand the psychological game, you don't have to become someone else. You just have to stop making your intelligence expensive to receive. That means learning how to be concise without becoming shallow, confident without becoming inflated, visible without becoming performative, useful without becoming permanently used. It means speaking in decisions, not just details, showing outcomes, not just effort, making your thinking easier to carry, letting your work be seen at the altitude where promotions happen. Because the goal isn't to mimic the most clueless person in the office. The goal is to understand why certainty beats depth in the short term, and then build a version of yourself that keeps the depth but stops surrendering the certainty. That's the shift. Not dumbing yourself down. Not playing games you hate. Just realizing that if people consistently misunderstand your value, the answer is not always work harder. Sometimes it's translate better. Sometimes it's stop being the cleanup crew for everyone else's chaos. Sometimes it's let people feel your judgment sooner. And sometimes it's admitting that the thing you called integrity was partly fear. Fear of being visible. Fear of being disliked. Fear of sounding too sure. Fear of stepping into authority before someone hands you permission. Meanwhile, the people passing you by were never waiting for permission in the first place. That doesn't make them wiser. It just makes them easier for the system to move. And if this hit a nerve, maybe that's not a bad sign. Maybe it means you're finally seeing the loop clearly enough to stop feeding it. Because the painful part was never just that other people got promoted. It was wondering whether your effort meant less than you thought. It does matter. It just doesn't speak the language of advancement on its own. You have to teach it to. And once you do, the whole picture changes. Not overnight. Not magically. But enough that you stop confusing invisibility with virtue, and stop confusing other people's certainty with actual superiority. A lot of the people rising fast are not smarter than you. They're just less interrupted by themselves. Learn from that without becoming them. That might be the most important career move you make. And if you've ever watched someone move up and thought, there is no way this makes sense, maybe the real takeaway isn't that the world is random. It's that the world rewards what it can feel quickly. Your job is to make your value easier to feel, without betraying what makes it real. If that's something you've been wrestling with, stay with it. You don't need a louder personality. You need a cleaner signal. And if you want, we can go deeper into that in the next one.